So as Republicans in Congress prepare to repeal and replace Obamacare, the Trump administration is proposing new regulations to stabilize the insurance markets in the meantime. The president giving a preview of what's to come at his rally in Florida over the weekend.
You want a health care system, and by the way, we are going to be submitting in a couple of weeks a great health care plan that's going to take the place of the disaster known as Obamacare. It will be repealed and replaced.
Joining us now for a spirited discussion, Leslie Marshall, Fox News contributor and syndicated radio talk show host for The Leslie Marshall Show. Also, Adam Goodman, Republican strategist, and Edward R. Murrow Fellow at Tufts University. Thanks, both of you, for being here.
Thank you.
Adam, there are a lot of Republicans who are disappointed. I mean, one of the early promises was that there would be a repeal and replace bill on President Trump's desk by February 20th. That's today. No bill. Are you one of those who's disappointed?
Not at all. You know, this is a place where a speed to market should not trump, no pun intended, well, maybe some pun intended, should not trump the right result. We got to get this right. We've seen what Obamacare did, John. It created skyrocketing premiums. Our deductibles are through the roof. There's very little competition out there. We just saw the news out of Tennessee recently where Humana just pulled out. And there's a sense of people kind of being left by the side and not being a part of this discussion. And I'm okay with it taking a little more time, but what it's going to really require for the first time, this is the first major test of what you might say is Republican control in Washington. They got to pull together, find the common ground that unites us, and have a leader in the form of President Donald Trump, who steps up not with pugilism, but with the power of principle. And health care is one of the fundamental issues that will define how strong this country is internally and for all intents and purposes for the rest of the world.
Generally, Republicans, conservatives like competition, Leslie. They say it lowers prices, brings better service. You don't have a lot of competition in some of these markets where, you know, you're down to, in some places, just one insurance company.
Yes, but if you look, John, before the Affordable Care Act was passed, this legislation into law that we have now, at the insurance companies, and if you look at the premiums prior to the Affordable Care Act, they actually were increasing at a higher rate when there was competition. So that's something that I think Republicans are aware of and are afraid of, which is the cost. One of the problems here, John, is that Donald Trump is a businessman. And this was a lot of us on the left, like myself, were screaming about that you cannot run this government like a business in the private sector. And I think Donald Trump is facing that reality. Republicans are facing the reality that this is going to be far more difficult to dismantle, far more costly to dismantle, and how many Republicans actually are starting now to like the Affordable Care Act or like a lot of what's in it and don't want it repealed and replaced, but rather tweaked, which, by the way, is what Hillary Clinton had originally proposed.
Well, Adam, when you've got, 23 co-ops and 15 of them have failed, it seems like you do need somebody who knows how to run a business to go in there and fix this thing.
Well, one of the fundamental problems with Obamacare, beyond politics raising its ugly head and getting in the way of really a good and proper solution. One of the problems is that it just hasn't lived up to its promises and people really feel let down. And competition, there's a structural imbalance right now, which is why there's no insurance competitiveness, where not enough, you might say, younger, healthier people were paying getting into the system as much as those who are older and have more decided medical issues. And the other thing we all have to ask ourselves, if you really want to take a look at what we need to do as a nation to all be at the table, because it can't just be hospitals and physicians and insurers, it has to be we, the American people, is we have to also look at the utilization of the system as it is, which includes trying to find resolutions to things like when something is not right, all you hear when you call the doctor is call 911 or go to the hospital. I think this is a wide-ranging, full-bore discussion that the American people need to be a part of, and we better get right. And so speed to market for me is not the definer. It is getting things to work.
Leslie, it's 1/6 of the U.S. economy. I mean, it is a big money proposal. It's not the money, I think, that bothers people. It's the complexity and the government regulations here.
This is, again, I've said it before and I will say it again, and I own part of a 24 orthopedic surgeon medical practice, okay, being married to one of those partners. And the reality here is this is a multifaceted problem, okay? One, we have less physicians than we do people coming on to the healthcare rolls, if you will, walking into those hospitals. Part of the problem with entering the emergency rooms is societal, and that's something we need to recondition and change going forward. This has bankrupted and closed many hospitals, and that's why some people in rural areas have to travel so far to get medical attention. And there sometimes just isn't, for the healthcare professionals, the amount of people to address the number of individuals coming onto the rolls when you look at the baby boomers becoming older, and the reality is, anatomically, we break down the older we get. When you talk about healthy people coming onto these roles, part of the problem, and this is why they had the mandate, and obviously it's not working as well as they had planned, is that when you're healthy, and when you're really young and healthy, you don't want to spend the money. You don't want to get the insurance, and if your employer doesn't provide it, you feel you're going to live forever and that you don't need it. That was a problem before, and that entered into one of the reasons that we need health care reformation, not just the financial aspect of it, but the physical health aspect of it. This is not going to be easy to change, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot of Republicans press that pause button and drag their feet.
Paul Ryan, among others, has promised that there will be a replacement in this session of Congress. We'll keep an eye on it, let you know what happens. Adam, Leslie, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.